Okay, looks like I got to warm you up a little. Guten Morgen. Ah, that's good, that's good. You are alive. Sometimes I'm like, am I still in the remote world and speaking to a screen and you're all imaginary, but you're real. This is good. Okay, so we're here to talk about testing web applications with Playwright. First of all, let me find out who here knows what Playwright is. Not bad, but not great. That's about 25 hands. Who here is using Playwright in production? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I have a lot of work to do, but that's good, that's good. I'm going to convince the rest of you to use Playwright. So I've already been introduced, so thank you for the amazing introduction. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle's down here, Debs_O'Brien, and you'll basically just see pictures of me running and cycling and doing sport all over the world, because that's what I love doing. I try to do about 3 hours of sport a day, because I think doing sport is healthy. And before COVID lockdown, I was literally working way too much, and I didn't have a life. And then when the government locked us up for 7 weeks and didn't let us out for sport, I was like, who is stopping me from doing sport? Myself. So now I put my sport first, and I say, right, I'm going to go running or cycling, and I do my sport, and then I go to work. So make sure you're taking breaks in your life. It's very good for mental health. So seriously, if you don't want to do sport, walk the dog, water the plants, do whatever, but don't be sitting in front of the computer for 12 hours a day. It's not healthy. This is Max here. Thank you. This is Max, who's also a part of the Playwright team. He's been there since the start of Playwright, and he is German and lives here in Berlin. So if you want to go running with him and talk Playwright, check him out on Twitter, and he'll go running and talk Playwright. So yes, enough about me. Let's move on. I should remove these because they kicked me out of the program since now I started Microsoft. But yeah, if you ever want to be a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional or Google Developer Expert, come and have a chat to me and I'll tell you how to get in there. So, Playwright testing. Playwright testing is reliable end-to-end testing for modern web apps. Works on any browser, any platform, one API. Tests are run in full isolation, so no cleaning up between tests. Fast execution and powerful tooling. I'm going to show you a little bit about the powerful tooling today. But first of all, let me go back here. First of all, I want to know who is actually testing their applications. Who here is writing tests? That's very good. That's impressive. Who here likes writing tests? Yeah, not as many of you. So my goal today is to make sure you enjoy writing tests. I'm going to change how testing is to make testing enjoyable and fun. Who thinks testing is difficult? Not too many. You all think testing is easy, or you're like, oh, I'm not sure. Okay, I'm going to show you how testing can be easy. So if you're a junior developer, or if you're leading a team of junior developers, that you're easily able to get them on board, that it's not scary and not something you need to be a senior to do. So that's my aim today. First of all, I'm going to show you how to use Playwright with VS Code. Who's using VS Code? Yes, excellent. For those of you who are not using VS Code, there is still time to use VS Code. But yeah, we do have the terminal, so you can still do terminal stuff. That's totally fine. I just like using VS Code because it makes my life easier. So we have an extension. Make sure you look for the Microsoft verified one and basically install that. And then you can start running Playwright. You just type in the command panel, install Playwright. Simple as that. Following me along, what happens next? You get to choose which browsers you want to install. Now, you could be on a Windows, you could be on a Mac, you could be on a Linux, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's going to choose the browsers you install. It's going to install them for you, right? Which is kind of like, wow. So Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit, or just one of them. Maybe you only need to test on one. That's up to you. And also a GitHub Actions. So ticking this box will install for me the GitHub action, which means my tests will run on continuous integration just like that, right? Simple as that. So always check that box. Really cool. I'll show you a little bit of that later. So after you install, I'm just running a Vue application here. I'll get a tests folder with an example spec that I wrote, which is very simple, but that's fine. But if you want to go deep diving into more testing, the demo to-do app will give you a load of tests that you can check out. And then you'll get the Playwright config, which you very rarely need to modify unless you want to add testing for mobile, for example. You'd go into the config for that. Or if you wanted to set up a dev server before you run your tests, you just go in there and it's all just uncommented and put the right port number in, and bang, it'll just work. So pretty much don't need to do a lot with the config. So running tests. When you're running tests, you can run all your tests, like every single test. You can run a set of tests. You can run just one single test. You can run all tests run in parallel. just out of the box, and they're super, super fast. So I'll show you how to run tests. So here is in VS Code. Because we're using the extension, we now have on line 3 this lovely little green triangle. And we can just press that, and the test will run. So here we go. Press that. The testing sidebar opens. It opens up a browser window. And I can basically test that I'm going to the installation page. Very simple test. I'll run that again, and you can see like how fast it is. And this is because I'm clicking here the Show Browser button, right? If you didn't want to see the browser, you uncheck that, and you don't have to see the browser. Maybe you don't need to. But basically, this little testing sidebar has everything in here. Check Show Browser, run your tests, and see your tests. So what happens when you have bugs, right? We never have bugs, do we? No, all our tests always work. So if you have bugs, VS Code is very good because they give you error messaging. So you've got live debugging in VS Code. So basically here, I'm going to just break a test. So instead of using the text getting started, I'm just going to put something like the word star, right? And then I'll rerun that test, and this test will fail. Now, the test fails, and it tells me there's an error. It's strict mode violation, because Playwright found 3 elements, and it didn't know which one you wanted. Is it getting started? Is it the word star? Or is it get started? So we can put a breakpoint here and rerun that test in debug mode. Now, when we run it, it's going to stop here, and it's going to show me, OK, here's 1 of 3 is get started. Down the bottom, I've got another one there. So which one do you want me to, because I don't know which one you want to click. So it's kind of helping you out, and you can live change it here. So if I put get, I've got get started and getting started down the bottom. So it's telling me I've got 2. Which one do I want? And then if I put something else, like, for example, get started, it's showing me that it's only got 1, and that's going to work. So that's basically how you can live kind of play around with your selectors, see what's going on, and debug your tests, and kind of have fun, right? Because testing should be fun. So locators, you saw a little bit about locators there. And what are locators? Locators are a way to find elements on the page at any moment with built-in auto-waiting and retryability. What does that mean? It means it's going to wait until that element is ready. So whatever you do, you don't have to set time out manually or do anything. It's going to wait for it to be ready. And as soon as it's ready, it's going to say, I'm ready to click, OK. And then if it's not, it's going to retry until it's ready. And you don't have to do anything. It just works out of the box automatically. So setting a locator, you do something like this, say const get started, and I'm saying the page dot locator, and then in here I have my selector. My selector is what I want to select, so text equals get started was my one. I could have put a button in there and then say button get started, although that wasn't a button, it was a link that looked like a button, so be careful as well. In how you're selecting, you could use CSS selectors, you could use role selectors, you can use attributes, so you can use all those kind of different ways, and there's a whole documentation page on selectors, and we've got some improvements coming to that API to make it very similar to the testing library API. So it's going to like get by role, get by placeholder, text, etc. So that's going to be coming soon as well. So lots of ways of using your selectors and locators. And it's strict by default, right? So we saw the strict mode. That is by default. You could turn that off, but then you're going to have a lot of flaky tests and problems, so don't. But just so you know that it is strict by default. So how do you pick a selector, right? I don't even know which selector to pick. Where do I even start? Well, basically, you can use this little button here called Pick Selector. That makes it easier. I'll show you now. We're picking the selector. We go along the page. And now as we kind of hover over things, it's showing me the selectors available. Has text, installation. If I click it, it's going to add it into the selector box in VS Code. And from there, I can press Enter. That will put it into my clipboard. And then I could paste it. Or I can go back. I can search this one. This is an area label equals GitHub repository. That looks like a good one. Or, for example, in the menu here, we've got an aside. And then I can have this aside text equals writing tests. And then I'll copy it to the clipboard and then just paste it in here. And then I can run that test, and that test will fail, obviously. But as you can kind of play along, find your selectors, and then basically add them in. So that's kind of really cool and simple. And I'm right here in VS Code without having to do anything. Again, if you're using the terminal, there isn't a way to do it in the terminal. I'm just not showing it, but it also works as well. So web-first assertions, make sure you're using web-first assertions. This is what's going to help make everything wait and retry, OK? So make sure you're using await, expect, and then locator. And these are all the assertions we have. So to be checked, to be disabled, to be editable, to be empty, to be focused, to have URL, to have screenshot, etc. So make sure you're using the locator, and make sure you're using the await, and then you're going to have no problems with auto-waiting and retriability. So, my friend CodeGen. Let me introduce you to my friend CodeGen. I really like CodeGen. He's really cool. And CodeGen is going to generate your tests for you by recording your actions. And this is where I said, remember those junior developers are like, I don't know how to test. I've got to learn testing. And it's like, no, we want you to get started. This is how you're going to get started very easily. So, CodeGen, basically, we've got a little button here called Record New. So I'm going to click that, and wait till you see what happens, right? So click on this button, Record New, and now I've got a browser window. But over here in VS Code, I've got a test1 spec file. It's imported the test, and it started writing my test for me, right? So I'm going to go to the local host that's open with the view page, and I'm just going to click on these, and it's adding this here to my test. My test is being written as I'm clicking. So I'm going along, let's see, documentation, tooling. Let's go to the Vite website, and it opens up that other browser, other site for me. I'm going to test that that is there. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to click on Playwright, because Playwright's cool. I'm going to make sure Playwright is there. I've got another window open. I'm going to go back to my first one, and I've got my test written. And I can cancel that now. And now as I go along, you can see I've got page, which is the first page, and then I've got page 1, which is the second page. A little confusing, but you know what I mean. And then I've got page 2, which is the Playwright page, and I'm able to test across multiple domains, right? Which is, if you imagine a payment process where you're using PayPal or something else, you can test that whole start-to-finish process and go back to your own domain and then finish off that shopping cart messaging, whatever comes up, thank you for your shopping, etc. So yeah, very simple example, but you can imagine the possibilities that you can do with that. So this is my test already written, and like, you know, you haven't even written any code, right? So my mother can write tests. So it's really cool. CodeGen is a great way to get started. It's not perfect, okay? CodeGen is not perfect. Just like GitHub Copilot is not perfect. You do need to kind of improve your code a little bit. And that's where what I do is I now go through my test, and I start adding my web-first assertions, right? Because if you notice, when I was writing that test with CodeGen, I was clicking things that the user wouldn't normally click, right? Like the heading or the logo. The user's not going to click that. But I was just being lazy, and I wanted to click that, so it would record it for me, so I could go back then and just modify it. Okay, so that's just how I write my tests. You could not click it and then just go through and write it. So basically, when I've done this, I can basically go in through here and say, right, what do I need to do here? So the text you did it, this is not a click, so let's remove the click, and let's say this is an expect, I want to expect it. I'm going to use the library to, and you've got all these here, it's telling me what's available, to be empty, to be greater than, to be hidden, and I'm going to choose to be visible. I just want that to be visible on the page. So the same with the view logo, I'm expecting that view logo to be visible, and here it's testing the alt tags, that's great, so I know it has to have an alt tag of view logo. And I can go through each one of these. This one is a locator, and we clicked on that, so that's good, that's perfect. The next one is the Playwright page. The Vite page here, we need to make sure that that text equals. Now watch this, I'm going to remove this dot first, right? And I'm going to remove the click, and I'm just going to put to be visible, right? So I'm expecting that text of Vite to be visible on the page. And is this test going to pass or fail? It's going to pass. You're wrong. You're wrong. You weren't listening to me earlier. Who said it's going to pass? So it failed because of the strict mode violation, right? And the word Vite is on the Vite page more than once, right? Why Vite? So Playwright's like, I don't know which one you want me to click. And it's giving me the options here available. And I basically want the first one in the header. So I want to go to the header. Inside there, I want to find the text equals Vite and take the first element that it has. So that's how I can kind of like, you know, test around, check my assertions, see if they're working. I'll run this now, and now this is going to pass, and it's a better selector. So basically, yeah, I could go through and kind of add more assertions on there and make that test much better. So what about component testing? Who here is actually doing component testing? Right? I know what you're using to do it, so you don't have to tell me, that's fine. I'm going to show you how to do component testing with Playwright. And component testing, for me, is a lot of fun because, you know, you can unit test your kind of components, and then you can't see anything. But using kind of the same framework for your end-to-end tests and your component tests means you only have to learn one thing, means you can generate code, it means you can do everything I showed you, but now with the component testing. So For component testing, you have to install it. So a little bit extra. You got to do npm init playwright at latest --ct for component testing. So we'll install that on top of what I've already showed you. And what this gives me now is a folder called Playwright. And in that folder, I've got an index.html file. This is where my component will be mounted. So it's like a testing page. And it's got an ID of root, and my component will be put there. So I can see that component in isolation. And then I've got an index.ts file. I'm using TypeScript here. You could use JavaScript, but I'm using TypeScript because TypeScript is cool. And it works and fully out of the box with Playwright. So you should use TypeScript, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. And then you can import any kind of global styles that you want. So if you have like, I don't know, a main CSS, a theme file, something that's global to all your styles, then you can import that here, and then that's going to apply to your CSS. So let me show you quickly. So component testing and global styles, I have here a component, very simple component, right? Just a hello world. And I'm importing that. I'm importing the hello world from hello world view. And I just want to make sure that this has a message prop. So I'm mounting the component first. And then I'm basically saying hello world message equals view and playwright. And I just want to expect the component to contain the text view and playwright. Very simple test, right? And then I'll play that. And I can basically see now this opened up. And you can see it's ugly, right? So it's mounted on the page, but it's really ugly. And if I inspect it, I can see that this is basically just the component here. The head tag is pretty empty, that testing page I showed you earlier. There's no kind of main style sheet there. There's just that div class. And like you can see, right, the h1 class is green, but it's not green, right? It's not getting the green because I haven't told it to add the CSS. So I can go back into my Playwright folder. I can take that index TS file, and I can basically, so here, yeah, here's the HTML file, which will show you where it's mounted, which we see, and that's where the title came from. And here I can put in these styles. So where are the styles coming from? So I want to import them, and I can search around and see where they are, right? And this is a view application, so when I go through here, and I'm looking down, I'm like, ooh, where are my styles? Are they in app.view? Are they in components? Are they in which folder they're in? And normally, some of the styles are in the app.view, so you might want to copy some of these styles over, okay? Because they're not going to be able to get access to those ones because they're scope styles. So you really want to take them into that main CSS folder, which is in the assets folder here. I've got the main CSS. And here I've got the green, right? So that's there. And if I wanted those other styles, I could copy them in and put them in because I'm going to have access to them. So I'll import that, and that's basically going to give me all the styles that are in that main CSS. So let's have a look and see what it looks like once I've imported it. I'll go back to my test file, and now if I run my test with my beautiful button, and bang, I have my beautiful green class, right? So now I can see what my component looks like in full isolation, taking those styles from main. If I do not add that main folder or that main CSS, I'm going to have very ugly component. So you need to understand what do you want from your component. How is it meant to look? Is it going to be themed differently? And you could change and add different themes and see how they look. So various component tests, so you can like completely write loads and loads and loads of component tests. And I've just written 2, but imagine 100, right? So from 2, you could literally just go and just play your tests one by one. So you can run all the tests, or you can run a single test. Here I'm testing slots. I want to mount the component like we did earlier. And I can put my component in here with a vslot heading, and it says documentation. This comes from the starter file. And I just want to expect the component to contain the text documentation. So I run that now, and now I've got the documentation here, right? So this component looks good, and it's got the styles already because we only added it. We added it before, so it's already added, so we don't need to add it for every component, right? They are done for the next one. So now I can go back to the first component, and I can rerun that one, and I've got this component back again. So I'm visually easily able to see the components as I'm writing the tests. And I can also break a component. So say in our message, let's put something like break me, for example, right? This test is going to break because there's no message there. But I can see break me, right? So I can visually see that this is what I'm going to get. But it's telling me it expected view and playwright, and it got break me. You've successfully created a project. but there's no, it's not there. So this is wrong. But I can visually see that it's wrong. So this helps me when I'm kind of debugging that I can actually see what's going on at all times. So that is component testing. Now, how does component testing work? First of all, who here thinks this is good? Yeah, excellent, good, excellent. So this is experimental, right? So it's not like fully, like things might change a little bit, but if you want to like use it and give us feedback on GitHub and stuff, more than appreciated. So do check it out. It works for Vue, thanks to Vite. I'm going to show you that now. So this is how our component testing works. We got Node. We have a powerful test runner built in Node, right? But in the browser is where our components are. So because our components in the browser, everything is real. That means we have, first of all, our powerful test runner, our file system, access, and parallelization. But then in the real browser, we got real clicks, we got real CSS, layout, and screenshot testing. So this is how it kind of works. And under the hood, what's going on is basically it compiles a component bundle and facet HTML page, which we've seen, right? So it takes those components, so count, card, title, for example, uses Vite to compile and bundle it. Vite then basically gives us this cache Playwright index HTML and the Playwright bundle.js, and then it uses Vite again to serve it. And then we've got that localhost 3100 Playwright index.html, and then obviously we built that into the VS Code extension so we can see it running in that. And that's basically all thanks to Vite. So if it wasn't for Vite, we wouldn't be able to do this. So thanks, Vite. So yeah, component test features, real browsers, Chromium, Firefox, WebKit, all Playwright capabilities, and a great developer experience. Importing components and using JSX syntax where possible. If you want to, you don't have to. Handling component events in tests. VS Code extension, which you've seen, debugging you've seen, and Playwright tracing. Oh, what's that? I didn't show you that yet. I'll show you that in a second. So first of all, let me show you about the report. So before you do tracing, you might want to be able to see a report. A report is a report of your test to see what went on, what happened. So you do need to use the CLI to run the report. We don't have this integrated into the extension as of yet. When you run using the terminal npx playwright test, it will run all your tests for you. And you can see here I'm running my tests on Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit. If I was running on mobile, it would say Mobile Safari or Pixel or whatever. And I can actually click on any of these and go through the test. And I'll go through absolutely everything that's going on in that test. I can click on that arrow, will expand it even further and go through all the code. So I can see what's going on, what happened if my test broke. Again, my component tests, I see exactly the same, right? So I've got the same report for every single component test, and I can go through that exactly the same as I would with my end-to-end test. Now, when it comes to traces, if I want to see a trace of my components, I can use this command, npx playwright test -- trace on. That's one way of doing it. Normally, the trace is run on continuous integration on the first retry. So if your component or if your test fails on the first retry, it will actually record the trace. And that's set up for you already. You don't have to do anything. But if you want to do this locally and just locally play around with it, which I like playing with the trace locally, I think it's cool, then you just use this flag here. You could go into the config and just put trace on, and that would do it automatically always for you. But it's quite heavy, right? Creating a trace for every single test, every single time, and saving it is probably not what you want to do when all your tests are passing. So just keep that in mind. But definitely just run it like this. And what happens is now, you saw this earlier, but now I've got this icon, which is meant to be a trace. I have no idea. It does not look like a trace. It's like a little jail, right? You can also open this, expand this out, and you'll see a nicer image. But I'm just going to click on this little icon. And what it's going to do is it's going to open up one of the traces. So a trace is basically what's happening in the whole state of your test. And you can see I just kind of went along there, and it shows me a full snapshot of my test. And I can go through every single stage of the test, right? So I can say, here is like my, where it's count equals 0, that's the action, that's what I clicked. And I can kind of, see what was happening, what was expected, what was before, count as 1, after, what happened. And at each step, I can see the difference, the action, before, count as 2. Okay, so I've got all this, and this is a very small example. If you imagine an end-to-end test from start to finish of a full browser going through different payment systems and coming back to here, you can see that and go through every single thing here. If you've got any kind of bugs or something, it's really easy to go in here and say, oh, look, I was expecting this. There's an error in the console. There's a network request that failed. Here's the source code. This is a zip file that is actually a PWA, so I can send it to a developer and basically send that zip, and they can basically run it and say, you know, and I'll have seen the code. I don't need to even have VS Code open to see the code, to see where they went wrong and say, hey, look, you need to fix this. So this is, it's absolutely fantastic. So play around with the trace. I like using it as I build, but again, you can use it just on CI. So talking about CI with GitHub Actions, I already told you that this works out of the box. So basically, the only thing you have to do is if you're doing component tests, you just need to write another one and say name component test, npm run test CT, and now it's going to run both the tests, the end-to-end tests, and the component tests. This will give me here, so you can kind of break your tests. The test is green if it's passed, and it's yellow while it's going through. So you can easily see what's going on. And if you click on the Actions tab, you get this Playwright report, which is what I showed you. And then clicking on that Playwright report, you'll be able to see that trace file. You'll be able to download it straight from GitHub and then open it up locally using Playwright and kind of play around with the trace after that somehow went on CI and broke or did whatever. So Playwright testing, we have the VS Code extension. We've got CodeGen, I just showed you, auto-generate your tests, run in debug mode, locators and frame locators, show reports, and show trace files. I showed you all that. Now you also just remember auto-wait built in for all actions, so there's no need to set timeout calls. Tests run in parallel, free. You don't have to do anything to get them to run in parallel. It just does it. It's super fast. You've got multiple browsers, multiple devices. Intercepting requests, follows all redirects, bypasses cores, and manages cookies. So it just makes your life easier. So the question for you is, are you ready to Playwright? Yes. Excellent. So if you want to know more about Playwright, there's a couple of links there. We do have a community Slack channel if you want to ask kind of questions to other members. We've got the docs. I've got an email address there. I never read my emails, but feel free to email me. On Twitter, DM. I won't be around for much of the afternoon. If you do want to chat to me, my DMs are open. Please just send me a message. Thank you very much. You've been a fantastic audience, and I look forward to welcoming you into the Playwright community and hearing more about your testing experience. Thank you very much.